So we saw in the last video that access lists are the first line of the defense in a security network. But I've been in environments where there are like hundreds or thousands of access lists. If you were to send the configuration to a TFTP server, it's like 10 or 20 pages long just for the ACL section. So is there an easier way to actually do that configuration? And luckily for us, there is. And that's through object groups. Now, an object group allows you to group different configuration items. This could be like protocols, think OSPF or GRE or IP, even TCP, subnets, IP addresses, TCP UDP ports, so that we don't have hundreds and possibly thousands of ACLs just clogging up the configuration. And this makes the ACLs more manageable and easier to read. Now, when I think of object groups, I think of 4 different configuration items that we would be using. And they are like, you could have a protocol object group or a network object group, a service object group, and an ICMP type object group. And I'm going to go through those. So when I think of a protocol object group, we're thinking of layer 3 IP protocols, which can include TCP, UDP, but I'm really thinking of like GRE or EIGRP or OSPF when I'm thinking protocol. If you're doing like a network object group, then this is going to be like IP addresses or network addresses or subnets. When you go into the service object group, you're thinking of TCP ports. So think of like Telnet, or it could be TCP or UDP, but if you're talking about TCP, you're going to be talking about Telnet, or you're going to be talking about things like HTTP, etc. And when you're going into the ICMP type, then you're talking about ping. So echo reply, even things like traceroute. They are the 4 types of object groups that you can configure, and I will be covering 3 of those. So I'll cover the network object group, the service object group, and then the ICMP type. So let's have a look at our diagram again. This is our diagram, and what I'm going to try and do is configure a ACL. So the inside network will be able to ping our outside network. So currently, I think it should be able to ping all of these 143.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So let's test that. If I open up the inside, 143.12.0.3. Yeah, let's try another one by random, .5. So it can ping, and that's because I've removed the ACLs off of our ASDM and CLI firewall. So what I will first do, I will create an object group where we should be able to use TCP. So we should be able to telnet and HTTP to the 143 loopbacks, but I'll only choose 3 of them, and by random I will choose loopback 1, 2, and 4. So our object group, if we're doing telnet and HTTP, if we were going to do ACL to those 2 ports for those 3, it's 2 times 3, so it would be 6 ACLs. And I should be able to make that into a singular ACL where I should be able to telnet to 143.12.0.1 or .2 or .4, and also HTTP to 143.0.12.0.1, 2, or 4. So let's start that. And the first thing that I will do is just type in object group. And the first one we're going to do is our network object group. As I said, the network configures IP addresses or network addresses or subnets. So we're going to collect each of those 3 hosts into a network object group. So if I say object group network, and we're going to call this outside for the outside router loopbacks. And then I should say network object. Is it network object? Object group network outside loopbacks. I should have an option of network address of the group members. Have I done this wrong? All right, let's try something different. Let me say no here. Let's try that again. Object group network outside loopbacks. Enter. Okay, let's just try host of 143.12.0.1, 2, and 4. Let's exit out of this, and if I do show object group, and let's see what comes up. And the whole reason why this wasn't working, because I'm trying it on our inside router and I should be trying it on the firewall. So let's jump on the actual firewall. Let's try that again. So object group network outside loopbacks. There we go. Network object host 143.12.0.1, and that configuration on our inside network shouldn't do anything because I haven't applied it anywhere. So we have host 1, 2, and 4. Let's exit out of this. And now I'm going to configure our service object group. So initially we've configured the host that we're going to actually access, and now I'm going to do the service. So object group service, and our service is going to be telnet and web access, and I'm going to put TCP at the end here. You can put TCP, UDP, or both TCP and UDP. I only need TCP. And I'm going to say port object equal to telnet, which is 23, equal to HTTP, which is 80, and I might as well put HTTPS as well, which is port 443. All right, let's see if this works first. So we're going to apply this access list. So let's say access list. I'm just going to call it test. It's going to be an extended access list. We're going to permit TCP from any host going to our object group called outside loopbacks. And also there's going to be an object group, which is our service. So anywhere going to our outside loopbacks that have been specified in the object group, if they're going to be used in either telnet or HTTP. So object group called telnet-HTTP. And then we're going to apply that to our inside interface. So access group, we're going to call it test. Going in, interface, inside. So now we should not be able to ping because we've got an implicit deny at the end of every access list. So whereas previously we were able to ping, we should not actually be able to ping any of those now. So ping 143.12.0.3, which we were able to ping previously, we can no longer ping because the implicit deny is denying that. And we can't even ping any of them that are specified in the access list. So we know that 143.12.0.1 was specified, but we no longer have ping access. However, if we were to exit from here and do telnet, so if we were to telnet 143.12.0.1, you see that we do have telnet access. So username of admin, password of Cisco. You can see that we have telnet access, but we haven't configured an enable password. And also, if I was to telnet again and use a port of 80, the connection is refused. Let me jump onto the outside router and just allow HTTP access. So to do that, jump on the outside router, conft. If I said IP HTTP server, let's try that telnet again from the inside router, and you can see that the port is open. That means that we would have HTTP access. All right, so that means that our access list has actually worked. Now, if I wanted to be able to ping, and the good thing with object groups is all I have to do is add one of those hosts to the object group. So if I was to go back onto our firewall and I was going to go back into our object group, show object group outside loopbacks. All right, right, let's just say show object group. Guys, I have a request from you. If you're enjoying the free content, I'm looking to increase my subscriber count to 4,000 subscribers by June. But I can only do that if you give me the play special. Do you want to know what the play special is? Press like and yeah, subscribe. Okay, back to the video. Now we see that in our object group outside loopbacks, if I was to add a object group, a host here, it will have all of these properties added to it. So currently, show run access lists. We only have a single access list covering all of these hosts and all of these services. Now, if I was to go into this object group here, paste that in, and you see that currently from our inside, we are not able to telnet to 143.12.0. Let's say 3. Connection is refused. But if I was to go into our object group and just say network object host 143.12.0.3, I've added it, go back into inside, and you see we are now able to telnet without adding anything to our access lists. Access lists, and it still only has a single entry for the access list. This is the power of an object group. All right. Oh, exit. Oh no, that's not what I want. Okay, leave that to do its thing. The other thing that I wanted to show you is that the ICMP type. So currently we are unable to ping. So I will add another object group where I will allow ping to everything that is allowed in our outside loopbacks. So we should, by the time I finish this, we should be able to ping 143.12.0.1, .2, .3, because it's now been added, and .4, but we shouldn't be able to ping 143.12.0.5. All right, so let's create another object group called ping allowed. So object group, we need to add a type, so it should be ICMP type, and we're going to call it ping allowed. And then we're going to say it's an ICMP object, and we're going to allow echo. And also, let me just show you, I will put echo reply for pings to reply, but you see that there's quite a few versions if you wanted to allow traceroute or any of these other ones, but I will just use echo and echo reply. And then I will say access list, we'll call it ping. It's going to be an extended access list. It's going to permit ICMP from any host using our object group that we used before. So object group called outside loop backs, and also object group, this is going to be service that it uses. So object group, have I done this wrong? Object group outside loopbacks. I have done it wrong because there's no object group called outside space loopbacks. It's outside underscore loopbacks. Object group called ping dash allowed. Yeah. Then we have to add it. So access group called ping. And before I apply it, let's just see if we can ping anything. So enable here, exit here. And now from our inside router, ping 143.12.0.1. We currently cannot ping, but as soon as we go into the CLI, access group, ping in, interface, inside. Let's try that ping again. And you can see that we are now able to ping. All right, that's it for object groups on the CLI. Let's have a look at that again on the ASDM. So we need to be able to do the same thing on the ASDM. So if I was to open up our DMZ, and let's just see what access we've got. I'm going to use a tickle script just to see if I'm able to ping all of the outside loopbacks from the DMZ. So for each address 143.12.0.1, .2, .3, dot 4 and dot 5. See if I'm able to ping those addresses. We'll just use a repeat of 3. I reckon that will not work now because I used a square bracket instead. I might have to put all of that in again. Nightmare. Yeah. Alright, let's try that again. Dot 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we are able to ping all of those. So let's jump onto the ASDM, and rather than pinging, so what I will do, I will only enable hosts, odd hosts, so 143.12.0.1.3.5, and we're going to be able to telnet and HTTP to those addresses. So let me jump onto the ASDM. Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm using the trackpad, so it's a bit slow with the mouse, but we'll get through it. Continue. Yeah, I accept the risk. Let's run that. And our password is admin Cisco. All right, so the first thing that we want to do, we want to go into configuration, firewall, then we're going to go into objects, which is here, and we're going to use network objects, which is the first one here. All right, then I'm going to say add and network object group. So I'm going to give it the same name that we gave on the CLI. So it was called outside loopbacks for our network object. Then what I'm going to do, we have the option of putting in a name for the host, but we didn't do that previously, so I won't do that here. And as I said, we're going to use odd host, so it'll be 143.12.0.1. Let's add that. Then 143 odd host, so .3 will be the next one. Let's add that. And the last one will be .5. Let's add that and say OK. And then the next one that we want to do is our service object. So I'm going to allow telnet and HTTPS. So we will add our service object group. And you can see we've got our TCP, UDP, ICMP. We want to use a TCP service group, sorry. And this was called telnet-HTTP. And rather than scrolling through, I know the port numbers, so I will say port 23. We will add that. The next one was port 80. Let's add that. And the last one was 443. And we will add that as well. All right, let's apply that, and it will tell us what is going to be applied to the command line, which looks brilliant actually. Let's send that. And then what we need to do, we need to apply these two to an ACL. So we've got our network object, we've got our service object. Let's just find our access list. So access rules here at the top of the firewall configuration. Access rules, add a new ACL. We're going to be coming in through the DMZ interface. If you look at the diagram, so on the ASDM, it will be inbound on our DMZ port on the ASDM. So our source is any source can be accessing these. Our destination will be our outside loopbacks, that new object group that we created, which includes 143.12.0.1.3 and .5. Let's double click that. As it says destination here, we know that is OK. So let's click OK. And our service will be our service object group. So let's click up to service, click here. Our object group should be somewhere here. Let's scroll up to the top and see if it's there. Yes, it is. So we've got our telnet and HTTP object group here. Click OK, OK. Let's apply that. So the only thing that is a bit odd is the name, DMZ access in, but everything else looks good. So let's send that to the command line. Now, if we jump back onto our DMZ router, we shouldn't be able to ping because we have an implicit deny at the end. So we cannot ping, which is expected. but we should be able to telnet and HTTP. So let's try the HTTP first. Telnet 143.12.0.1 port 80. This is open, which is exactly what we expect. And if we were to telnet without the port on the end, and let's say a different IP address, so let's say 143.12.0.5 with a username of admin, password of Cisco, and we are able to telnet to that. Let's try one of the ones that we aren't able to. So let's telnet to 143.12.0.2, and we see that connection is refused by the remote host. Okay, that's it for the ASDM. I just heard the Iqama going for Salah. I'm in Egypt at the moment, so I'm going to hurry over to the masjid, but I'll see you in the next video.